Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Carrie and Dani. Last time we talked a little bit about flags in church and all different things, and so I think we're keeping that theme going about different stuff in church, maybe church, potentially music, or what we have
Yes.
in what we listen to outside of. So, Dani, I know you said you had some thoughts, so let's start a conversation and see where this goes.
Um, okay, jumping off point for the conversation. One of our listeners sent me an article. Um, and I just had a quick read through it a couple of days back and thought, oh yeah. And then when I actually read it, I thought, oh my goodness, I couldn't decide if it was about religion. My initial thought was this article is really racist. Why did it was this printed? And then I realized it was written by a black lady. And then I realized it was actually about religion and church. So I'd love to just have a chat with you about it, Carrie, and see what you think and how you feel. Um, I sent you a link to the article, didn't I? Maybe you can post that later on.
But yeah,
So
sure.
the article was from Fulcrum Magazine, and
Hmm.
it was called "The Problem with Black Music and Why You Shouldn't Listen to It." Um, and
And
this,
just a reminder for people who don't know who Fulcrum is so Spectrum and Adventist today are far left side of the Adventist I don't know, spectrum, I guess. Fulcrum is far right. So
okay.
very conservative is what my impression has been. So go ahead.
A very conservative certainly fits with this.
Hmm.
And I won't read the whole article, just a few pieces. She starts off saying, "It's during that season of deliverance when I recommitted my life to Jesus and became there's the word, conservative, Seventh-day
Hmm.
Adventist. The Holy Spirit impressed upon me major problems with black culture and its stronghold in black spiritualism." And this is the bit. After reading The Great Controversy by Ellen White, I arrived at a decision. Okay, so she was a black woman living 2 hours away from Hollywood. Um, and the stuff she says about black music just fascinated me.
Hmm.
Um, the necromancy is the heart of black music. Ancestor worship is the foundation of black spiritualism. And basically, she says you shouldn't be listening to, oh my goodness, black music, hip hop, drums. And you can go and read the article. I don't particularly want, I guess, want to talk exactly about everything she said, but more about how I felt when I read it. Because
Hmm.
she then goes on to say, what about Christian rap and Christian rhythm and blues, Christian soul, Christian gospel? And then she talks about the attitude that comes when you listen to this music. And that's what made me laugh because she goes on to say that basically black music is full of bump and grind, and it's going to cause you to want to have sex and engage in spiritual worship and all sorts of crazy things like that. So I had an interesting chat with one of our listeners about it. And
Hmm.
um and I actually had a bit of a laugh because the listener was telling me how she used to listen to that Japanese music.
Oh, I don't know.
Um oh, she's gonna strangle me if I
Techno or
don't recall.
something?
Yeah, some sort of special Japanese techno weird music. And I just remember thinking, if black music causes you to bump and grind, then listening to Japanese music surely should cause her to want to become a samurai or a geisha.
Right.
Then I got to thinking about myself. And I guess the article was just one of those things that got me thinking about what I've experienced personally with music and how I've changed from where I started or haven't changed and a bit of the journey. So I remember attending one church, and we talked a little bit in our last one on flags in church. I mentioned that I attended a church even 25 years ago that had a full band and electric guitars. They had drums. And then I turn up at church camp in America, a ginormous church camp, and they just had two guys on a guitar. I was just surprised that it was so many people there, and guess my thoughts at the time were, oh, yeah, cute.
Cute.
It just didn't, I don't know, it didn't. It, two guys and a guitar is lovely around a campfire, and I have all these wonderful romantic thoughts and memories of it. But in a huge, big tent, when you're trying to bring about corporate music and worship,
Hmm.
it just fell a little short, I felt at the time. But so it started at the beginning. So growing up, I was taught that growing up that music was very powerful, and you need to be really careful what you listen to. And of course, growing up in the Adventist church at that time, we didn't read literature outside the Adventist church. We barely watched movies.
Hmm.
They're all heavily censored movies and checked over. And so, yeah, music. We grew up listening to classical, basically classical music. And I can remember my favorite music growing up was oh, there's a piece of classical music called the Donkey Serenade, and I liked it because it had hoof beats in it. The music made
Mm.
like the clip clop of the sound of the horses, and I'm crazy about horses, as anyone that knows me knows. Um, so it was that, and a few other classical pieces. And then, if my parents were having a brave day and we weren't listening to classical, the only other stuff I remember besides some church stuff was Charlie Pride. They had the silver anniversary album of Charlie Pride. So I grew up listening to that. That was about the most evil and sinful our music got. So what did you listen to? Started your beginning too then. What did you listen to growing up?
I think one of the earliest memories of music, I think as a kid, um, my mom had a pretty big, they had, I don't, my parents had a pretty large collection of records, and so
Yep.
we listened to the Beach Boys, we had Bobby Vinton, we had Roy Orbison, we had Johnny Cash.
When you
Um,
were little,
mhm.
oh, Carrie, you grew up sinning,
I
obviously.
did. And then and I'm trying I'll have to ask my mom about this because and I grew up really close to Andrews University, and so we would get these people that would come and do special little presentations at our little church that was close to Andrews. And I have kind of a vague memory of this guy that came and did a presentation on music and how bad, music with a beat was. And I do remember my parents, and I couldn't have been more than maybe 7 or 8 when this
Hmm.
happened. So I mean, 40 years ago, probably. And I do remember them going through their records and getting rid of quite a few. And I'm curious, I have to ask them, like, are you upset that you got rid of some of those? Because I don't know what all they had. They might have had Beatles records that they got rid of or whatever. I don't know. Um, my parents graduated from high school in 72 and 74 respectively. So right around in the 70s and stuff is when they acquired a lot of their music. Um, I know they got rid of quite a few, and I think we've kind of slowed down a little bit on some of that music, but I do know at Christmas time we had Christmas records that were Snoopy and the Red Baron. I don't know if you remember that one.
Oh, yep, yep. I remember
Yep,
actually, I forgot about we did have some Christmas music that was
yep,
different. I remember that one now that you
yep.
bring it up.
And the Beach Boys Christmas album and some of the other ones. My parents listened to. I remember listening to country music on the way to school, sometimes. So my folks weren't that conservative really when it came to music outside of Sabbath, So during Sabbath time, of course, it was more Sabbath music, probably the Heritage Singers. Remember listening to we had a cassette tape of the two different cassette tapes of the Heritage Kids albums that we listened to. We listened to the your Story Hour broadcast on Friday night at 7:30 and Sabbath morning at 7:30 from Andrews. Um,
Oh,
Church
kids' music. Did you have Salty the singing songbook?
Salty the Singing Songbook. I don't think so.
Oh no, we had a kids one about Salty. It's called Salty, and it was a singing songbook. I'd forgotten about that, and then yeah, we had some other kids' story music tapes. So there
Hmm.
was like the Cheetah Sisters, and they told a story and sang songs that went along with it, and they were all stuff that was brought from the ABC, the Adventist Book Center, of course, and it all had a moral. None of it was just for fun. Like it all taught you values.
And we would watch 3ABN on Sabbath sometimes, so they would have the kids broadcast and we'd listen to music. If it was just a talking program, we didn't always listen to that, but and music in church as far as growing up, it was organ and piano for the most part.
Yeah.
Um I remember it was always controversial when somebody would sing with what they'd call canned music, where you'd have the accompanying cassette, you know.
Okay,
So we'd
right.
always call
That's
that
really cool
canned
back.
music.
Yeah.
And I don't think my parents had a problem with it, but a lot of the older, more conservative folks would, especially if the guy running the sound system didn't get the balance right and the song was too loud and you couldn't hear the person saying
Yeah.
or whatever. Um, I do remember having some guitar, but I don't remember if it was in church service per se. This is all when
Okay.
I was a kid.
Yeah. Did you play music? Did you
I
play anything?
was a bad pastor's wife and I did not know how to play the piano.
I was thinking about when you were a kid. Did you
When I
grow
was
up?
a
Did you
kid,
learn an
no, I did
instrument?
take a couple years of piano lessons and I did
Yeah.
play for the offertory a couple of times for Pathfinder Sabbath. I was able to bang out a
Okay.
song or two, but nothing enough to do that. I learned how to play the recorder in elementary school.
Yeah, we did that too. But I went to a church school, so we only learned to play like Joyful, Joyful and some of the simple hymns. We only
Sweet
learned to
Hour
play
of
good
Prayer. I
music.
can I can still play that if you give me a recorder. I could play Sweet Hour of Prayer with my recorder.
Oh, goodness me.
But music has always been such a controversial subject, I think, in any church.
Yep. And I was sort of, like I've said before, we tend to talk more about how we felt about something and experienced it rather than
Hmm.
the actual deep theological debates about it all. And it doesn't matter what the theological debate was at the time or whether the church was right or wrong.
Hmm.
The fact is that it impacted me.
Yeah. And I
That
so just
yeah.
just this weekend I was visiting an Adventist church with a family member. And the church that I regularly attend now is mu very much a contemporary church. So it's contemporary
Mhm.
Christian music and people are raising their hands and the people up on the platform m might be dancing, just so you know. Oh. Um, and so if you're listening, you might have your hands up and stuff. So I'm attending a church and it this weekend and it was on the college campus, so it's a little more contemporary. But they were playing the song, one of my absolute favorites. And when we said we were going to talk about this, I pulled up to make sure I say the right one. It's the Gratitude song by Brandon Lake. So I throw up my hands and praise you again. And I love that song. And when I'm at my regular church and it says, and I throw up my hands, your hands they just go.
Yeah.
And so they're doing this and they've got the praise band with the kids in front of the college campus church. And they're doing a great job, but they're standing straight, like they're not moving, no hands. And I'm just a few rows back because we knew somebody that was participating in service. And so I put my hands up, but only about here. I didn't go way up, but I had put my hands up because I couldn't not. And I think so. I remember as a kid or even, as an adult as well. It's like you shouldn't get um blown away or moved so much by your emotions. Like it should be all logic. It should be
Yeah.
all brain power, not just be moved by your feelings. And
Hmm.
I love the fact that um the current church I attend, like if you want to just stand and not move, that's fine too. But if you want to put up one hand, both hands all the way up, because we're called to raise our hands, and dance for joy, So when you said we're talking about music, I'm like, this is a good one to talk about because they're singing up front. So I throw up my hands and I praise you again and again because all that I have is a hallelujah.
Hmm.
And these kids, and I talked to some of them that were up at one gal that was up singing afterwards, and she goes, "Yeah," she goes, "I saw you had your hands up, but I figured I better not
I
because it's the main church, but there's one that's more much more contemporary in the area that these kids
yeah.
attend more often. They said at this church we will put our hands up and it's fine because everybody else is.
I had a really good friend, Marie. She died when I was in my mid-20s, and she was my closest friend at the time,
Mm.
and had been for quite a few years. And I met her originally at junior camp, one of the junior camps or teen camp, the big church teen camps. And she was the I was at teen camp, but she was the barely older than you counselor. They used to bring in, kids 2 years older than you to do stuff, and we
Yep.
just become bestest of friends. And she went on to be a school teacher, and she did a lot of drama. And then, so she used to teach drama. Once it became more acceptable at church, when we were all a bit older, she was teaching drama, and she would do the skits and plays for the youth tent at the big camp meetings and things. And then she went on to study law. But I'll never forget, just she had a, she had a different way of looking at things to me. And I love the way her brain worked. It was so different to mine. And she used to say yes. And she'd say, "There's a reason why you're not allowed to put your hands in the air when you sing." And I'd be like, "Oh, what is it?" And she goes, "Well, it's everybody knows, Daddy." And I'm like, "What is it?" I remember the first time she told me. And she goes, "It's because there's a layer of evil and it floats just above your head. And if you stick your hands into it, they're like a wick and you tap into it and it'll like drain into your body." And I was like, "Oh."
So what about so what about the short people and the tall people?
She didn't explain that to me.
Yeah.
But she's also my same friend that used to say to me, "You know that everything above the knees in your body's sinful, right?" And my first thought is, she's talking about sex or something. We're just kids. Must have been
Uh-huh.
about seven, perhaps about 18 or 19 at the time, actually. We're teenagers. And she goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, everything above your knees is sinful." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Well, why else are you only allowed to like paddle in the water on Sabbath? You're not sinning until the water goes over your knees."
True.
And I know it's not on the topic of music, but this is my favorite thing that I remember her asking me about. Out of everything she said, the one that really stuck with me is she remember her saying to me, when the old fellas at church pray?" And I'm like, "Yep." And I remember my granddad and the generation that's long, long gone. Um, and they all had a similar style of praying. And she used to say, I remember her saying to me, "So, what's the difference between a traveling mercy and a stationary one?" You remember that, right? They always prayed for traveling mercies. And
Traveling
she said,
mercies.
"Yeah, what's the difference between a traveling mercy and a stationary one?" And forever I've wondered if there's little mercies and they flap their wings and they fly above your car. Or, I don't know. It's just one of those crazy thoughts. But the things that shape your childhood. I can remember we moved to live in Australia. So we'd been living in New Zealand, and mum and dad got divorced, and so mum took all us kids back to Australia. And oh goodness, must have been about 1986. And mum made friends with the next door neighbour, and she went along to their Pentecostal church with her once or twice. And then I joined as Christian singles group, and I think they might have had some dances or something. None of us kids didn't know about that because she was trying to have fun but keep us conservative, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. She was trying
So
to
trying
live
to
her
keep
best life, but not corrupt you at the same time.
that's right, that's it. Live your best life, but keep your kids saved.
Yep.
And I remember it was 1986, and mum came home with Dire Straits' Walk of Life, the whole album. And I remember her putting it on and playing it really loud and dancing around the lounge room. And I remember being like, "Wow," and horrified all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I still love that album to this day, actually. I still love it. And I remember, little things like my cousins, when I must have been about 11 or 12, and I had a cousin that was about 6 months older than me, and she had some friends outside the church. I don't know how that managed to happen, but she did manage to get some. And I remember them playing some music that wasn't Christian music, and they were dancing around the lounge room, and her parents weren't home. And I remember her saying, "Come on, come on, come on, come on, come and dance with us." And I was just so mortified. I can remember going into her room and hiding under the bed and refusing to come out because there was evil music being played in the rest of the house.
Mm.
Um, I mean, look, it's actually a bit embarrassing to tell that story. I mean, to think that I was that horrified that I actually had to go and hide under the bed because they were playing really bad music. And it's just been an interesting thing off and on through my life, the whole music thing, because I love music. When I came to America and spent 6 months there, one of the things that excited me the most was that there was 24-hour country music videos
Oh,
on the television. I was staying with friends, and every time they left the house, or I was on a different time zone and I was up later than them and they were sleeping, and that I was like onto the television, straight to the country music TV. And I got to not just hear the music, but you hardly hear it. It's not a big thing, country music over here, really. I
oh.
mean, it's a big thing, but you don't get a lot on the radio, not like over there. And it was so exciting to watch the music videos that went with everything. It was one of the
Mhm.
highlights of my first trip to America was 24-hour a day country music videos. And to be able to actually go to Horror of Horrors. Someone took me to a very safe, not really out there bar, and they actually played country music. That was quite exciting as well.
Mhm.
Um, and then my first actual experience with ever going to a dance, like a nightclubby type thing in a dance,
Mhm.
was when I was the year after. The year after Mum had brought the Dire Straits album, and I was at Avondale College. It's like the equivalent of Andrews, but it's the one in Australia.
Yep.
Avondale College, where the big white estate houses and blah, 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 all that stuff. And I actually got talked into jumping on a little, someone had like a minivan. There was a minivan full of us. And I got talked into going to a nightclub. And I got talked into it. You can guess, right? Seriously, you got an Adventist church college. Somebody talked me into going to a nightclub. You can you guess who it was? Come on. Who was the majority of people dragging people off to the nightclub and corrupting all us innocent people?
The theology majors.
Yes, it was the theology students. All the to-be church pastors
Uh-huh. Oh
took me to my
yeah. Yep. So this is a total side note. So one of my best friends from childhood, she got her master's degree and she works as a counselor now. And
yeah,
she did her residency or whatever they call it, internship at the end with her master's. And she wanted to do it. She did it at the local psych ward at the hospital. She said not that she wanted to work in a psych ward, but she wanted to see what the worst versions of the disorders that she had been saying out, what they really looked like so she could recognize them and stuff. And she said there were
yeah.
quite a few seminary students that ended up in the psych ward,
Not
local to Andrews.
surprised.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
mhm. Yep, yep, but that's not what the what the video is about, but that's a
yeah, no,
interesting
not surprised.
interesting
And I
side
mean,
note.
yeah, Peter did a really good one on SDA Q&A a little while back with Christy Williams, and
Hmm.
she was talking about her experience in the psych ward and how Adventism affected her mental health so badly. So anyone watching want to know about that, you can go and find that and listen to it. It's a great listen.
Yeah.
She's a fabulous speaker. Um, so yeah, I've got my music experience is sort of been in and out.
Hmm.
When I think about it, it's been impacted by what sort of the church I ended up at. Yeah, but what sort of church I ended up at, and I know that when before we crazy before I don't recall taking premarital counseling before I married my ex, but I do recall for some reason we decided that we were going to go to dance lessons. So we went and learnt some ballroom originally, and I think we didn't end up going till after we got married in the end. We did ballroom dance lessons, and then we moved on to rock and roll. Obviously, ballroom dancing is a gateway drug because we ended up doing rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And I highly recommend it to absolutely anyone. If we'd gone and had dance lessons before we got married, we'd have never got married.
Oh, really?
It was, oh yeah, no, no. It was the whole, I could seriously, it was the whole, just follow, do as you're told. And then there's me going, if you want me to follow, you got to lead better. And I highly recommend anyone do it. But do it before you get married. You might actually save yourself some drama. And that was really amazing. And then we ended up moving. We were milking cows. We ended up moving farms. We ended up at a smaller country church. And the music, the guy that was like the music leader and did all the music for that smaller country church. Um, I remember it being It's an Adventist church. I remember it being normal, like the normal songs that I'd expect in an Adventist church for that stage. And that was probably in getting into the later, so like about 96, somewhere around 96, 97, I think, somewhere in the later 90s there. And I don't know what happened or where he went, but he came across some people that had talked about music, and they said to him, all music that has this sort of a rhythm is evil. So back to the article that we talked about the article we talked about that, where she said that the music had its roots in black culture and has its
Mm-hmm.
roots in, occultism and spiritualism. Well, he went to a meeting on that and decided the same thing, except he cut out not the worship, just forget the worship songs. He refused to play half the music in the church hymnal. The really, really old church hymnal? He went through and looked at everything, and you've got 3/4 time and 4/4, and then you've got some that's 6/8 and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And I forget what fragments and fractions of musical beat he decided were all had their roots in this evil black music. And he cut out half the hymns that we'd sung in church. I mean, really old hymns that my grandparents grew up singing. This is not even modern music. And so um, I remember being really angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't get it and didn't understand. And it was a really interesting experience when I look back at it, because if they'd tried to introduce rock music or some of the modern Christian, I'd have got it. But the cognitive dissonance and the stress of it was larger when they were cutting out really, really old hymns and trying
Mm-hmm.
to tell me that they were evil and they were going to take me to the devil. And I found that really, really hard to cope with. And we ended up leaving that church, but there was no other church around, so we stayed for as long as we could.
Mm-hmm.
And then people that I really, really admired. So there was someone that I'd known most of my life that was an incredible musician. Um, they played not just for church things, but they played for stuff outside of church. They could teach music. They played something like 10 different instruments at a concert level. And when we used to have the big church youth dinners and all that sort of stuff, they used to do it. They'd, play the piano or the saxophone and do a lot of the musical background. And they got into the same thing. So it was a big thing here in New Zealand back then. They got into
Mm-hmm.
the same thing, and they refused to play music for any of the big youth dinners and any of the big weekend youth meetings, and they wouldn't play half the songs in the church hymnal either, because certain rhythms, even the ones in the church hymnal, were going to lead you into evil. So did you have a phase of that in the States that you remember, or was that just something that happened in the little culture area I was in?
So if that was in the late 90s, that was when I was in college. So
Yeah.
I graduated from high school in 96, and so I was kind of more hanging out with the college kids, so I'm not sure as far as the general mainstream Adventism, but I don't remember anything where it was they refused to play hymns. I do remember when my husband was pastoring, one of the elders at the our church, the only songs that were that he thought were permissible to play during the divine worship hour of 11 o'clock was in the church hymnal. So none of the He Is Our Song books, the
Uh,
more kids
yeah.
one, wouldn't play any of those during during worship service. But I don't remember anybody going through and saying these hymns are not allowed.
No, Woody Allen hymns. It had a big impact on me again more recently. So probably 5 years back now. So probably during the COVID times and stuff as well, when I was looking at my relationship with God, because God was coming back really soon. That was very clear. Speaking of which, I had friends from different churches, not Adventism, a friend that messaged me and said, "Do you think that, this is Mark of the Beast?" And I'm like, "No, no, it's really not. It's just political stuff. This is not Mark of the Beast stuff." So I mean, I wasn't crazy about all of that, but uh, it's just again, it's causing you, as Adventism does. Here's the next crisis. God's going to be back in the next 3 years. So look at your life again. And I remember having these every year or two, the whole time I was an Adventist. That's what the church runs on. Keeps you scared.
Hmm.
And so I went through another phase where I started only put worship music in my car. It's an hour drive to town, and I'd only listen to worship music. And sometimes coming home at night, if I was really tired, I'd look at my country music and I'd be like, "Oh no, just no, no, no." And I was working really hard to fill my head with, oh my goodness, I was working really hard to fill my head with religious stuff,
Hmm.
to be honest, hoping that that's where you'd find God. And the crazy thing is, of course, I didn't find him till I left all that religious stuff behind.
Yeah.
Go figure. And I know these days that I listen to country music in my car and I travel back and forth to town. And I love to dance. I actually went back to dance class probably, I don't know, it'd probably be quite a while back now, actually. I just think it's probably 18 years back, 17, 18 years back. And I went back into dancing again and won some small competitions in rock and roll and then moved on to Ciroc. Loved Ciroc dancing. And
Hmm.
some of my friends that I knew that were sort of on the edge of the church, I remember an older lady saying to me, "Wow, you've got an amazing sense of rhythm for somebody that grew up in the Adventist church and was never allowed to dance."
Mine's
And
not. Mine's not
on
very good.
mine is, but I think that's also to do with horses because horses are very rhythmic with riding
Hmm.
and stuff. But
Hmm.
no, great sense of rhythm. I don't know, I like to think it's because I've got Scottish DNA and it's just in my blood. I mean, I love bagpipes too, but it's another meeting, another
Hmm.
day for that.
Hmm.
Um, I guess what I've found through a lot of it is, and where I've come to in the last couple of years and where I've landed is that I mean, listen to a limited range of music, so to be honest,
Hmm.
but God's actually in all of it. And even for the times that I just listen to my country music and sing it, and I don't think anything to do with God, or I'm listening to Toby Keith singing "Who's My Daddy" or something like that, and I'm like, yeah, it's a bit suspect. It doesn't change who I am. I don't go running off out there and doing crazy things. None of it
Hmm.
inspires me to have sex with the next door neighbor or anything ridiculous like they talk about, music causes bump and grind. I just don't find that it has a negative impact on me. I, I, I don't know why it was ever an issue, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't understand what the big deal is. I don't understand why it was ever an issue. I don't understand why somebody would write racist articles about it and print them in a church magazine.
I think, and something that I have thought about too in general is that I think Adventism and other high control religions are so afraid of their people getting corrupted and leaving or seeing
Yeah,
other things that you're trying to limit your entertainment, limit what just to make sure that I think they realize that their hold on people is so tenuous that they need to
yeah,
hang on to it for dear life and make sure they're not influenced to leave and go do other things.
that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
and I think that's part of it is because they know that it's so weak. But we have like two
Yeah,
minutes left, by the way.
yeah. I was just going to finish up with
Go
saying
ahead.
that if I use music correctly, it really helps improve my life. And
Hmm.
the best example of that is I hate washing dishes. We don't have a dishwasher. I've got to wash them by hand. I hate washing dishes. I hate washing dishes. But you know what? If I get out my little music thing and my speaker and I set it up on the shelf and I put on my favorite, really energetic, like great modern country dance music. Take off my slippers, so I've got slippery, socks on the wood floor. I don't see anything wrong with dancing around the kitchen and washing my dishes if it helps me get the jobs done.
Hmm.
In fact, I love it.
Yeah.
And I just think it's sad that I grew up missing out on some of the great joys of life. Not
Hmm.
that the classical music was bad. I mean, I'm glad I had exposure to it, but there's just so
Yeah.
much more.
I think there's so much joy in life that can just be embraced that you have a hard time embracing when you're in the clutches of a high demand religion. But if anybody has any stories they want to share about music growing up or their favorite stuff to listen to now or any of that stuff,
Yep, tell
um,
us about it. And if you
yeah.
tell me that listening to country music and dancing while I wash the dishes is sinful, I'm not going to reply to that because it's not.
Yeah, constructive stuff to say only, please.
No, no, no.
All
Tell the
right.
truth of what you feel, but yep.
That's right. All right. Well, we will see you all next time. Have a great day, and please like and comment and subscribe. Bye, all.